Here we go. And you guys are live.
Okay.
Yay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another virtual author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and we're delighted to have back with us one of my favorite authors, Sophie Sullivan,
Thank you.
virtually. And we're delighted to welcome a new author and friend, Gigi Blume, is it?
Yes.
Both authors are here today to talk about their works, but before we begin, the Poison Pen does have copies of Sophie's new book, Get Lost with You, and we would be delighted to hold one for you or put one in the mail. Just give us a call or go online to the Poison Pen bookstore. Now I'd like to welcome Sophie and Gigi.
Thank
Hello.
you.
Thank
Hi.
Thanks
thank
for
you for
having me.
joining us
I'm
today.
very excited.
My first question for you, and we'll start with you, Gigi, because you're new, is tell us a little bit about yourself before you became a published author.
Oh.
Before I became a published author, well, besides the fact that I've always wanted to be an author and writing, especially things like screenplays, I was also a wedding singer.
I read that
Oh.
somewhere. Is there really a thing such as professional
That's
wedding
amazing.
singers?
Well, I worked with a church and we did a lot of weddings and other
Oh,
events too. So, you know, not it's not like the Drew Barrymore movie. It's nothing like that.
did you have a background in music? That's why you went into that, or it
Yes,
just happened?
yes, background in music, musical theater,
Oh,
and when I was in my 20s, I was in a band and all
wow.
those things, those fun, crazy 20s things that people.
Good book inspo.
What's that?
That's good book inspiration, all of that.
Yeah, yeah.
What about you, Sophie? Who was Sophie before you became published?
Well, I'm still that person now. I was a teacher before and I'm a teacher still. Yeah. So I've been teaching actually for 24 years this year.
Wow.
So, yeah. Writing the whole time, but not published the whole time. So,
Now, if I remember correctly, Sophie, you actually tried to get published early on for a True Confessions magazine.
I did. My mom, oh, I love them. She still has them. I don't know where she gets them, but they were True Story magazines. Sometimes they were called True Confession, True Story, True Love, and they were just these. He had it was like this awful newsprint, but it was
Mhm.
just columns of stories. And I tried really hard when I was 12. My mom said it was really good, so I don't know why they didn't publish it.
When did you decide you really wanted to become a published author, and what was that like getting your first book into print?
It was amazing. I had gone to a conference about 12 years ago and I wanted to do kids publishing, kids books. I had written a picture book and I got signed for that. And I knew absolutely nothing about the publishing world or publishing at all. Um, and so I got an agent and I lost that agent because I was very impatient and wanted to write everything. And while I was kind of meandering there, I started writing romance and there was I guess it's a contest. It was through Anaya Press, which is a Christian press. But I just wanted to write, and there was an offer to write with one of the editors to co-author, which at this time, like now, I would know, okay, you have to make sure your styles sync. We just got really lucky that they did because I knew nothing going in. And she had this book premise, and we wrote that book. And so that was my first book, Dangerous Love with Anaya Press, and it was co-authored with Carolee Miller. And it was wonderful, but I'm really, I was really happy to break into the mainstream romance. And then, of course, to be able to publish under Sophie Sullivan has been amazing. So,
What about you, Gigi? What was the transition from wedding singer to first-time author?
Oh gosh. I started out actually writing from when I was 10 before I started in music. So it was kind of like coming back around to my first passion. Because when I was younger, I used to write all sorts of crazy things. Like, I was writing a musical screenplay for Batman.
You're
wow.
ahead of your
Batman the
time.
musical, it was going to be
Of
a real
course.
smash hit. But, when I was 10.
I love it.
But it just came back around. I had, actually, I had a time in musical theater. I had this really good friend. We'd stay up till 3 a.m. just talking about stories and talking about things that we wanted to write. And then, I mean, we just kind of lost contact. And years later, we reconnected, and I saw that on Facebook that he was a published author and he had written all these books, and I was like, wow, that's really great. I want to, you know what? I'm an indie author, so I'm like, if he can do it, I'm going to do it too. So that's what got me on the trajectory, and I landed in romantic comedy and having a lot of fun with it.
Before we go any further, Sophie, why don't you tell us what you want readers to know about your new book, Get Lost with You?
It's like a straight up mushy kiss fest. It's a
We're here
really,
for. We love it.
yes, that's what I'm here for. It is what happens when, that youthful feeling you have when you have your first really, really true crush, like 16, 17, and what happens as an adult if that actually worked out the way you wanted it. And I just want people to be happy when they read it. It's not all, the whole road for them isn't perfect, but they remember who they used to be to each other, and that kind of builds a foundation for Jillian, who's got, a history with bad relationships, to be able to trust Levi and move forward with him, maybe in a way that she wouldn't have been able to with someone else. So it's really special. It's really kind of poignant and a little bit wistful, and yeah, lots of happily ever after.
And it's actually the second in this
It
particular.
is.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's lots of the other characters in there. I like to throw those characters back in lots.
What about you, Gigi? What's your recent book that readers could get a hold of?
My latest book is a Christmas romance, and it's called
Oh,
Cross-Check Christmas, and it's a hockey romantic comedy. And it kind of has like a betting trope to it,
mhm.
sort of like 10 Things I Hate About You, where
Yeah.
he goes back to a small town, and it is very similar, actually. Sophie, when I was reading your book, I was thinking, wow, this is kind of has some similar themes because both had crushes on each other when they
Yeah.
were back in high school, just like Levi and Jill.
Yeah.
And there was like an almost kiss kind of situation. I was like, oh,
Yes.
when I was reading, I was like, oh wow, there's a lot of the same themes as,
Yeah.
as my last release, which was really, really
Yeah.
fun. And seeing how um just like how who they are now as an adult versus when they were in high school,
Yeah.
and how some of that still remains, right? Because
Yeah.
we're still the same people in
Yeah.
a way. Like sometimes I feel like a high schooler still. I'm
Yep.
52, right?
Yep.
So, it's like I love that. I love the themes of like when I was reading it, I was thinking, wow, this is like past, present, future.
And future. Yeah,
Right. So like
exactly.
she had her past with him and her brothers, and she's got her daughter, and now Levi comes back, and so it's just like a really fun how it has like a lot of those similar themes to it,
Yeah, it is
which
very
I
cool.
loved. And he's like the best cinnamon roll. Levi's just the best cinnamon
Yes.
roll guy. Loved
He's
him.
sweet. Thank you. I love that. That's very cool that there's overlap like that.
Yeah.
What about the small town setting? Because you both used it in your recent books. Do you, why are you drawn to it as an author? Why do you think romance readers love that particular setting? And I'll throw it open to both of you.
I don't know. Do you want to go first, Gigi, or
Oh, you go ahead.
I as a romance reader, I'm not I feel like it adds to the cozy layer of feeling safe and secure, and you don't know everybody. There's a sweet spot where it's like, okay, there's too many people that actually know every person, but there's such a huge group that you do know that watches out for you, and there's that kind of camaraderie and people rooting for you, and people, getting in your business that shouldn't but do in the most meaningful way, which kind of I really think the secondary characters always add to it. And when you have a small town, you can have a great cast of secondary characters that really help build the romance. So I think that's why I'm drawn to it. And then of course, knowing that as a reader, that's why I kind of gravitate towards it as a writer.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, same. Actually, this particular series, it's called Toronto Titans, so it does take place in Toronto. But in this book, he goes back to his hometown, which is north of Toronto. It's based upon Perry Sound. I don't know if you've ever been to Perry Sound.
I was born in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Actually, my
Oh,
aunt is from Parry Sound. Yeah.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
No, so I've only been to Perry Sound once. I used to live in Toronto.
Okay.
And I just love the islands and the boat ride and the whole idea of that. This really, when I went there, I just thought, oh, this is such a little idyllic place. This little
Yeah.
small town is so cute. So I said, okay, I'm going to have the Christmas book set in this little small town that's based on Perry Sound. And I just love how in a small town romance, because I do write also big town romance, which is like, because
Yeah.
some of the series is based in Toronto.
Yeah.
Um, I love like the meddling people, the meddling townsfolk. I love that
Yes, they're the best.
a little bit of magical whimsy that's in a small town where,
Yeah.
especially for a Christmas book, for me, it was like a little bit of magic, a little Christmas magic in there, and everybody kind of knows each other. And then there's all those special shops, all the little places that you go to.
Yes.
You always go to the same little places, and you're always going to see a familiar face there. The little coffee shop, a little bakery,
Yeah.
all these little things. It's almost like Disneyland.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I
Somewhere
think.
you want to go back again and again, right?
Yes, yes. It's
Which
like,
I think is what pulls readers in because it's like, and that was part of it is people are like, oh, we get to go back to Smile, right? You get to go back to Perry Sound or like it just
yes.
it draws you in because it's like having a good memory of a vacation, like Disneyland.
You like
So
Disneyland. Yeah. I want to
yeah.
actually, I wish I could go to the lodge and spend some time there.
Oh,
Wouldn't that be great? We had a writing
wouldn't it
retreat there and there's the
wouldn't
lake
it be wonderful?
and yeah,
Yes. I would like that very much. As
that would
long
be,
as the Wi-Fi and everything's working, everything's up and
yes.
running well.
Yeah, we'd need some Wi-Fi, but maybe not. Off the
Yeah.
grid. We'll see.
Okay. We'll
Levi's
see.
cooking. Levi would have to cook,
Yeah. Yes.
make his biscuits.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna be hungry.
Yes, that book made me hungry. Let me tell you. You write about a chef, the book's gonna make you hungry.
Yeah. Yeah, for
I
sure.
was like, ooh, the s'mores, and oh, wait, I'm
Yes.
thinking this, and oh, the pie.
Yeah. Yeah, I could go for pie.
Yeah.
Did you base Smile on any particular town, or is it completely your own creation?
I mean, it is my own creation, but it's actually I used it's funny that you say Perry Sound because there's a little island off of well, off of Vancouver, but also off of kind of in between Vancouver Island called Bowen Island. And I went there once like 20 years ago. And I just remember being really captivated with the idea that, you take this short ferry ride and it's a world of its own. It was still, it was right next door to Vancouver, which is huge, but it's this tiny little place that, you actually can get lost in. And it's got this own, so Bowen Island is, I think there's about 5,000 people there, maybe a little bit more now. But yeah, they're completely self-sufficient. They have their own school system and their own, sanitation department, own libraries and police. And so I love that idea that it was a world within a world.
I have to ask, are community boards a real thing?
Yeah, I don't know, but I think they should be. Can you imagine?
Can
It
you
would be
tell us a little bit about
hilarious.
why did you want to include that? Is that a way for other characters to get their voice in?
Yeah. So the community board, and I honestly think it would have to be a smaller town than Smile, but I love the idea that I mean, they have all the things that you need there, but there's still this kind of old school charm that, Gramps and Marina and the people that, the older generation are going to be like, I'm just writing it on the chalkboard, and when Presley comes in book one to Smile, she's like, well, let's maybe make a Facebook page or let's do this or let's, maybe like update things a little. And you've got those holdouts that are like, no thanks. And I love that. So one of the first things Levi does, of course, is he goes in and he votes on whether or not Beckett should ask Presley to marry him. And I love that because, I mean, he could just text Beckett and be like, dude, what are you doing? But I love that kind of community building, silly, and people stand there and they like it, right? So I think it bridges the community from young to old in a way that, Facebook or something couldn't.
I think that these do, I think they do exist because I
Yeah.
have a friend that said she lived in a very small town and they had like in the local, um, like the convenience store or whatever, the little
Yep.
market, they had a little jar and it was a question of like, well, I won't spoil, I won't tell her story, obviously, but
Okay.
what if she wants to put it in a book, right?
Yeah.
But she says that there were this little jar. I was like, hey, well, what do you think
Yeah.
about this? And people would put their votes in this little jar that was by the counter in this little market
Yeah.
in this tiny town. So I think
Yep.
that definitely. I would say for sure there'd be community boards, just like there
Yeah.
when you go to the local college, there's community boards, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's
So,
that's the kind of idea, only it's a chalkboard, which is a little older. We do have this thing at some of the restaurants. It's just like a one pager, but it's like 11 by 17, so you unfold it and it's got just, around town. And that's even, I live in a place where there's like 90,000, 100,000 people, and that's even in this town. There's this kind of little community thing where it's like, okay, if you want to try this or you want to go here, and there's little ads for, coupons and things like that.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
For me, Sophie, Get Lost with You was a book about second chances in many different ways, about a second chance at romance, a second chance at repairing a relationship with a family member. Can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, I think it's interesting because sometimes after I go through edits, my editor will come back and say, let's pull the tropes out a little bit more, right? Like when you're in the editing process. And I hadn't really thought about second chance. I was really, hooked on the childhood crush and single mom piece of it. And when I was thinking of second chance, I'm like, but her and Levi haven't been together before. So how's that second chance? And it kind of broadened my thinking about second chance, which was really nice for me because, like you said, it was a second chance for Levi and his family. And it wasn't maybe a second chance technically for Levi and Jilly, but it was her second chance to get it right.
Hmm.
And she'd already kind of been through this. And I think opening that up for me, seeing that it could be about more than just, a couple that's been divorced and get together again or something like that. It really opened that up. And I think that it's important. I think that with Levi, especially with his family, he didn't even know he needed that second chance. And I think that I think a lot of times that happens where people are just, you go on, his family, never said anything about him not coming home because dad was mad and mom didn't want to put pressure on him, but then he kind of realizes he needed that second chance with him, and so he's glad he came home. And so it doesn't always have to be romantic, but I love that for them it is.
It was beautiful too. It was just very
Oh,
beautiful.
thank you. Thank you.
The other thing I was really impressed with about the book is I hadn't really thought about this, but you brought it into the picture. Sometimes people think you have to have one dream. In Levi's
Mm,
case, it's you're going to culinary school, you're becoming a professional chef at these big name restaurants, and that's your dream, and that's the only dream you can have. You can't
yeah.
ever have another dream.
Yeah. Yeah, people lock you into things. And I think for me in the last several years, it's been really important for me to, I mean, not just as I wanted to be a teacher so badly. I didn't get into the teaching program the first time, and I was devastated. At the time, I wasn't even thinking about writing professionally. And so I remember having that. And now that writing is such a huge part of my life again, that is, the new dream. And I have a 22-year-old daughter and 18-year-old daughter, and we've been really careful to tell them because, of course, kids have this expectation at between 16 and 18. Okay, you need to start deciding what you want to go to school for. And we've always been really careful to tell them, yeah, go to school but it's okay if you change your mind. It's okay if you get into this and this isn't the job you want and you realize that this isn't the path. And I think it's really important because I think a lot of times as adults we get stuck in this spot where it's like, okay, but I can't go chase something new because I've already built myself up here and I've established who I am and I've established my career path. It's scary to try something new. So,
Mhm.
and I think that Levi's brave to do that, and it's kind of a scary part for Jillian because he's willing to do that, but it also makes her a little bit brave to try too.
Gigi, your new book series is based around hockey. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Perhaps you can explain something to me, and I'll preface this by saying I know nothing about sports. I'm not a sports fan.
Okay.
Croquet is my version of
Right.
sport. But what is this? It seems like all of a sudden everyone loves hockey and hockey romances.
I know. I know. It's everywhere. And when I first saw a bunch of hockey romances pop up, I thought, well, what is, and I used to live in Toronto, okay, so I know the obsession that Canadians have. And then, like, in the United States too, especially in Boston, it's a
Mhm.
sports town. And so growing up in Canada, you see that obsession, right? But I've also been kind of more of an artsy person, and not quite into sports. I think a lot of us, are if we're into books and art and stuff. But when I started, I thought, well, this idea came in my head for the book. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna delve into this. And as I started doing research, I found it so fascinating. Um, just the whole culture behind hockey, and not just the fans and not just the game, but just the meticulous way these athletes pour themselves into the sport and into the way they dedicate themselves. I'm sure that all professional athletes are like that. You hear of Olympians, and I mean, they live, breathe, and eat it, and it's everything to them. But it's so disciplined, and there's just like a beautiful community around it, as far as as soon as they walk, or as soon as they wake up, really. Because I've seen some documentaries on, following hockey players around, and it just shows you what can be done if you, in any kind of discipline, right? If you only follow this kind of, um, in this kind of discipline that they have in their lives. Um, and so I was really fascinated with it when I started doing the research, and then I just dove right in. And I think another thing is with, I think that a lot of readers, from a reader perspective, they really like a sport with sports romance. They want someone who's strong, and
Mhm.
they want the muscles and all of those things, and feeling protected. And I think a lot of times that they feel that way with a big, strong hockey player. And that and football, those two sports are very popular in romance right now.
Do you think in some ways, I'm not sure that the analogy extends, but when you look at historical romances, the Duke was always the big deal in for the heroine, and now we look at billionaire bad boys as the modern day equivalent of dukes. Are
Yeah.
sports figures the modern day equivalent of like knights in a medieval romance?
Oh yeah, and
I think it's definitely
that is
the
nice.
idea
Yeah,
of protective, right? Like that
protective.
idea that, and so determined. And when they want something, they are willing to fight for, it, which I think translates so well to romance, right? That
Yes.
personality when the sports athlete who spent his whole life dedicated to something,
Hmm.
and now, his world is opened up, he's going to have that dedication to be the kind of man that she needs, right? So I think
Right.
that's kind
And
of overlaps.
of course, you want the heroine. We want the heroine, and living vicariously through her, to be that one person who is going to turn his whole world upside down.
Yeah.
And
Hockey? What
it's
hockey?
all hockey, 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 or it's all
Yeah.
football, football, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's all mafia, 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 or whatever he is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but for her, you know,
Yes. The
so
world opens up.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
he kind of flips his world around,
Yeah.
and then he's obsessed. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's the fantasy, right?
It
That's the
is.
universal
Yes.
fantasy.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Both of you have written what we call series of romance or connected books. Do you always know when you're starting a series that this is going to play out into 6 books or 4 books, or does it sometimes just happen organically? Can you talk a little bit about, are there pros, advantages to writing a series? Are there disadvantages or challenges?
So Gigi, you're independently published, but even when I do my own books on Amazon, I have a series, but with my agent in the traditional publishing, my agent always tells me to think in threes. So I don't always know what will be next. It kind of comes out in the first book, which character is going to stand out, but I definitely go into something thinking in terms of three. So even if I were to write under my Jodie Holford name again, I did just write a standalone, which I think honestly was really freeing in a sense because I didn't have to. I think in a series, it's almost like you plant these Easter eggs that you don't even mean to, right? And I think if I went back through Love Naturally, you'd see those little bits of Jillian in there. And I went back when writing the second one to make sure I had consistent characteristics, but you don't have to do that with a standalone. And it's kind of like, and when you move on, so I write multiple series. So right now I'm working on Grayson's story, so I have to go back into that world and re-immerse myself. Whereas with a standalone, I think you can just, it's sad, but you say goodbye to it and you're done with that world, right? So I think there's pros and cons for both.
Hmm. Yeah, I have one standalone, which in that standalone, it's actually a very different type of book. It's a witchy Halloween book, which is very different from like hockey or
Yeah.
I have another one that's set in Los Angeles. It's a family of brothers. Um, I wrote this as a standalone loan, but I did sprinkle whenever I'm writing anything, I will sprinkle in something that I
Yes.
could be a shoot off, right? You could, and so
Yes.
it's there. And so the readers are like, are we going to get this? Are we going to get
Yeah.
that? Are we going to get more sisters? And like, well, there are sisters, but
Yep.
it just depends. And as an indie author, I'm sure it's different where if something isn't quite resonating with readers, you can shift very easily. So, that
Yeah.
particular book didn't really resonate. And so I was able to shift back into, my other stuff. So you get to experiment, and actually it was very freeing because it was
Yeah.
fun. It was Hocus Pocus meets Gilmore Girls, right? So it was
Oh,
a
fun.
fun thing to write. Um, so and
Yeah.
yeah, but generally
Definitely
when
pros
you
and
write a
cons.
series, you kind of are, for me, I do plan, I do plan like, okay, well, there's six brothers or whatever, or there's
Yeah.
this many hockey players, and that's how many books you're going to get.
And
Unless,
readers want that, right? Like as a reader myself, I mean, the as soon as you finish a book you love, you're like, oh, I hope the best friend's book is next, right?
yes,
That's
yes, you're
yeah.
like,
So
okay, when's Lainey's book coming?
yeah, which is a
You going to end up
question
with
I get
Graham
asked.
or what, so.
Yeah,
It's like going back to that small town,
it
right?
is, and
It's going back to
reconnecting with
that world.
everyone.
It's comfortable and they want
Yeah.
more of this. They want more of these characters and they want to see where, they want to see where, Jillian and Levi in
Yes.
a couple of years. And so we're going to see a little,
Yeah.
like we see Presley, right?
Yeah.
And we just kind of see where they are
Yeah.
now, right? And so as you go through the series, the book one couple will still be there and you'll get to kind of
Yeah.
glimpse into their life and it's kind of fun to see that.
And you love that, right? You love going back and knowing that it
Yeah.
wasn't just happily for now, it was happily forever, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you want when you read the end, you're like, "Oh, I want more of this," And so on to the next
Get a
level.
little more.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the publishing process because you both kind of are going at it from different directions. Sophie, you're mainly traditionally published, and Gigi, you're indie published. For
Yeah.
those that might not understand the ins and outs, can you talk a little bit about the process and why you chose that path, or it chose you? We'll start with you, Gigi.
Well, I didn't even query. I didn't even bother with that because I am a little bit of a control freak.
Oh,
I, I mean, as an indie, and I'm not sure the ins and outs of trad publishing, but as far as I know, with indie, you have a lot more control over your covers, over your marketing, over a lot of things. And it's just something that I just wanted to just do myself. Not saying that someday I won't turn down something that comes my way. Let's say Big Five comes at me and goes, well, we like your stuff. We want to see you do more or whatever, or however it works, or if I submit. But it is freeing and you get to kind of be on your own schedule, which is also a con, to be perfectly honest, because if you don't have someone pushing you, saying, "Hey, calling you up and going, I need this manuscript by this date," there's a tendency you can, in fact, kind of slack if you're not careful. So you have to really be very driven as far as like as an entrepreneurial type of thing. Set deadlines for yourself and make sure that your day is scheduled and you don't get distracted, which can happen. Never
Yes, it
happens
can.
at all, to
Never,
be fair.
ever. There's
it
that
also
discipline.
requires a little bit more work on your part, I would think, because there isn't a marketing department. There isn't somebody else that's doing you're it pretty much,
For
aren't you?
all of it. You're all of it, which is to me terrifying. And I think I don't know if it's because I have published books on my own and they've never done great, which is fine because I know they've found some readers and I enjoyed writing them and everything else. But whether it's time or my mental capacity to actually absorb the information, I'm really bad at marketing. Um, and I want to learn more, but between, life and a full-time job and writing, it's really hard to take that on as well. And I think I am in awe of published authors because they are the whole thing. And for me, I don't get as much control. And there's, times where like, oh, I wish I could do this, or I wish I could make this come out a little earlier. Or when I have short stories, it's like, okay, is it okay if I publish this as well? Because the characters are, under their publishing house. But I also, for me, the part where it's like, okay, I'm going to get 5 covers to choose from. Which one do you like? I don't have to go and find all of those things for. So it is a time saver for me. And those things are worth giving up some of the control simply because I feel like, my strong spot is the writing piece. The other pieces are really hard, but I see indie authors just killing it with, their marketing and getting their names out there. And I think it's amazing. Just not good at it.
It's a hustle.
It is. It absolutely is. And like you said, I mean, people often ask, well, how do you write so much and you've got so many books coming out? Because I'm on deadline, right? Like that is like that discipline. And I'd like to believe I'm disciplined enough to get those books out if I were doing it on my own. But the truth is, I told someone that it'd be due and they
Yeah.
send me my edits and it's due. And I'm not going to miss a deadline like that for someone else. Whereas for myself, I'd be like, well, I can kind of do this. Right.
Yeah,
So it makes it a lot easier.
that's the kind of structure that I mean, someone like me, I think really needs, but at the same time, like
Yeah.
you're a little afraid of that, right? Because you're like, well,
Yeah.
then if I jump
Absolutely.
into this, then I'm
Yeah.
stuck, right?
Yeah.
Especially for us, it's pre-orders, right? So you
Yeah.
receive pre-order, and if you don't make that deadline,
Yeah.
there are going to be consequences if you don't make that pre-order deadline. So you can't just sit on your butt. You have to, you have to you got to do it.
And you always have to be, not that I'm not, but you always have to be learning and willing to change and pivot. Whereas for me, it's like, when I'm not on TikTok, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, but when something new comes, like my marketing department was like, hey, we're trying this little thing that we saw.
Ah,
Why don't you do this little video? It's like, okay, is that,
why don't
what
you
kind
do
of,
this? Go
yeah, I'm like,
saw
okay,
this
I'll do
thing.
that.
You go do it.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
And
And,
do you go on there and you go, okay, well, I'm going to learn this little dance or whatever.
no,
You don't.
no, I will
You
never
don't.
do that.
But I mean, do you do some of
But
these suggestions? So they say, well, we
But
saw
yeah,
this.
absolutely. And they'll suggest things like, oh, this for content, which is great. And then with the little videos, and they
Yeah.
also will set up, which is, I don't think people realize this, but no matter how many books you've written or how many authors it's very nerve-wracking. Like I was okay reaching out to you because we had chatted a bit and we had met in
Yeah.
person. And I was like, okay, we have a mutual friend. It's
Yeah.
okay to just ask. But it's really hard to reach out to authors and be like, hey, do you want to do an event with me? Do you want to
Yeah.
blurb my book? And there's that
Oh,
middleman, right? So I can say, hey, can
right.
you ask this person if they want to do this with me? And it kind of does that first step for you, which,
Yeah.
if someone turns you down, it's like, well, they didn't turn me down. They turned down the publisher.
Yes. Yes. That's
Yeah.
why I have my PA. She'll reach out to,
Which I
if,
need desperately.
like, if they don't, if I, she's reached out to bookstagrammers that I
Yeah.
didn't know
Yeah.
before, and which was such a blessing, like with on Bookstagram, it's this community, right? You're
It
meeting,
really
they
is.
become your friends.
Yeah. They
These readers,
do.
they're so wonderful. Readers and authors are like
Yeah.
just a great community, really
It
loving,
is.
welcoming, and which is great.
Yeah.
But there's always more of a reach, which is great when you have somebody else to go,
Yes.
hey, are you interested? You want to be on the ARC team or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's I do like that piece of it. That piece where I can say, hey, I'm not sure. And even when I'm struggling to get the book out there, I can be like, hey guys, I tried this and this. Which I mean, you can do that with your author friends too. But again, I sometimes feel bad because especially when you're busy with writing books, I don't want to be like, hey, can I reach out and ask you questions and like take up your time for something that I should be learning on my own, right? Like, I don't know. I always feel like it's a
Well,
little bit of an imposition. I
I,
don't.
I think that's what's so great about this community I think is very
They
tight.
are great.
And I have a whole bunch of authors that I know that are so like they're just a wealth of information and
Yeah.
support.
Yep.
I mean I have like so many that and it helps when they write in your same genre too.
Yes.
For me, a sweet rom-com. I write closed door
Yep.
rom-com. And so I have a lot of people that are surrounding me, and I can at any day just and I have my critique partners too. I have two
Yep.
wonderful critique partners um, that I can reach out to and say, hey, I'm curious about this, or hey, how did when I got signed my audiobook contract, I had question, there was an audiobook company reached out to me and they said we want to do your audiobooks. And so I had zillion questions and
Yeah.
a plethora of answers in the chat, in the
Oh.
chat we were in. We're already in a chat. Always doing cross promos.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important. What we do is such a solitary practice, right? We're sitting down in front of a computer, writing with imaginary friends in our head, right?
Yeah.
And it's so important to have those people, right? And
Yeah.
I really honestly think that like the fact that you reached out to me, or I would not worry about it, reach
Yeah,
out.
I know. And I feel that way about other authors. I'm like, please, like, ask questions, do things, because I think that's the only way to really give back what other authors have given to me. But I think one thing that you kind of highlighted with the indie versus traditional, which I didn't even realize, and this might just be me, is maybe mine sometimes is a little bit more isolating because you have to lean on your people and you've created this group chat. And I definitely have like wonderful people who have been supportive and stuff, but I don't have critique partners anymore because my editor reads it. And I don't have, I'm not reaching out to ask about audio because my publisher does it. So I'm not drawing from all of those sources and building as many. Like I definitely have wonderful connections and I'm so grateful for all of the connections I've made. But there is that piece of it where I just have one go-to where I ask them and they tell me the answer.
Well, in a way they're the experts, right? So it's
Right? Yeah.
if you have someone who really knows,
Yeah,
you
pros
know,
and cons.
you know what I mean? But I still really do think there's a community out there. And from my
I
perspective, I
absolutely.
see trad authors, I'm like, oh wow, look at them. They're doing these things. They're blurbing each other's books. That's something we
Yeah.
don't do, which I would really
Yeah.
like. We're so busy, right? We're so
Yeah.
busy. And
Yeah.
that would be so fun to have like,
Yeah. It's
someone
it's
blurb
an
our book,
honor to be asked. Yeah.
really?
It's an honor. Yeah. No, and those are the cool things. And again, though, that's the nice part about traditional. It's like, can you ask this person if they can read my book?
No, and I always say it seems like this little community, like, oh my gosh, Ali Hazelwood blurbed her book. How cool. Or,
Yeah. I
and like
think
see
there
them
is,
doing these
yeah.
signings together. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, she did something with Tessa Bailey, and
I
you
know.
know,
I do that
Helena
too.
Hunting.
Don't worry. Yeah.
I was like, well, Helena Hunting, oh my gosh,
I
I'm so jealous.
know.
And it's such a really cool, like from this side, the grass is always greener. This side, we always see
Yep.
you doing all these amazing things, and we're
Yeah.
just like here going, oh man.
The true hybrid would be putting it all together so we can have it all.
I think one day. I think it's going that direction, probably. Maybe. I don't know.
Expand the scope just a little bit. I'm going to ask both of you, why romance? Why did you choose this genre as a writer? And I've also noticed, especially in the last couple years, there are trends in publishing. Certain genres have their heyday. There was the Gone Girl suspense
Yeah.
moment. There were all these different things. Romance was big. It kind of ebbed a bit, but now it seems to be back more than ever. Why is this sudden renaissance of interest in reading romance?
I honestly, for me personally, the world is a hard place, and I know that it's always a hard place. I mean, history shows us that, but we have so much more access to the negative things now. And reading's always been an escape for me. When I feel my anxiety ramping up, I will go and get my favorite books. And I honestly, I don't even read the whole book. I just go and read my favorite parts because it's calming and soothing. And I think that people are looking for that escape. They're looking for, something that they can count on and lean into, and it makes them feel hopeful. And it reminds them that, there's terrible things happening in the world all the time, but somewhere someone's also falling in love and having a baby and getting engaged and I think that we need that. We need that kind of hope and happiness. And it just, as a writer, that's why I gravitate towards it. And those moments that make you just kind of, oh yeah, there's good here, right? So for me, that's reader and writer.
Mhm. Yeah, same. For me, whenever I read anything or watch anything that's really not even supposed to be a romance, I always find little romance tidbits in there.
Yes.
There's me reading Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
going back to the appendices. Okay, well, let me hear the story of Arwen and,
Yeah.
Aragorn.
They would have kissed here if it was romance.
Yes, they fell in love. Okay, let me read the appendices. Or like, I was like, even my kids are getting me in the anime. They're like,
Okay.
we
Yeah.
could just let's get mom into anime.
Yeah.
So I've been watching like things and going, okay, well, who's this character going to end up with? And it's just a
Yeah.
story about these guys that are slaying like demons and
Yeah.
stuff. But
Mhm.
I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
there's some romance
That's
right there. I
romance.
see
Yeah.
it. And I
Yeah.
think that it's a very human thing that we gravitate towards.
Yeah.
That is, when there's story, you kind of want there to be a little bit on that, even if it's not necessarily supposed to be, because I think that's how we're wired.
Yeah, even if it's a friendship, I mean, I definitely want the romance, but even that kind of fulfillment you get from making a connection with somebody, right? And people crave that. That's why we're all on social media so
Yeah.
much, right? But we crave that. We want that connection. We want someone who sees us and accepts us for who we are.
And during the pandemic, I will say that when you talk about there being a renaissance and kind of more popularity when those thrillers were popular, I think romance has always been a very popular genre.
Mm.
But even more so after the pandemic or during the pandemic, when everybody was going through this really horrible thing, and especially in my subgenre of romantic comedy, I think that lightness, people wanted that escape. They wanted that happiness. They want a little bit of bubble gum, a
Yep.
little bit of something. They want a little bit of chocolate cake, something to make them happy, right? So
Yeah.
I think that, like, as far as trends go, uh, I've always noticed that when something is kind of crazy going on in the world, people go to their entertainment and they want
Yep.
something light and something happy. Like during the World War
Mm.
II, and after, there were all these great sweeping musicals, right? They were, very happy, very bright, very colorful, a lot of dancing. And I think that needed that. They needed that lightness in their life when
Yeah.
the world was on fire, right? So I think that is something to do with it for sure.
I agree completely.
I think it helps. You both made excellent points too that and sometimes people who don't read romance or don't write it don't get this, but the inherent promise of a happily ever after is what is so important about romances. Romances can tackle tough issues. They're not all
Yes.
sunshine and flowers and everything else. They've done really serious things really well, but
Yeah.
romance readers know, as long as they get to the end, things
Mhm.
are going to be resolved. They're going to get their happy ending.
Yes. Which I think gives you again that faith and hope in the real world that, and I mean, Gigi, you're like a parent too, and I know with my kids, it's like, yeah, you're seeing this awful stuff online, but there's good stuff too. Like this happened, and that's what romance does. Like you said, John, it's got there's hard issues, can't help falling in love dealt with, her mom not grieving properly over her dad dying, and I have mental health issues in my books, but it shows you that these things do exist and you can still find the good and you can still find the happiness and pull on those things and just find reasons to smile, right?
I love that. Yeah,
Let's
because
talk
that's
about
life,
both
right?
of you. We've
Yeah.
talked about you as writers. Let's talk about you as readers. You write
Mm.
romance. Is that what you started out with as readers? Who were some of the books and authors that made an impression on you?
Well, you got to go with Francine Pascal, right? I mean, Sweet Valley High is it. That and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Honestly, it's the book I remember as my first book that this book is amazing. And it's not a romance, it's just a girl. It's a book about being a girl and having a crush on your brother's friend, and then he's an idiot, and all of these things, and I love that. I got into reading romance when I was older. I loved James Patterson for a long time, and then I found romance. And I always wanted a little more romance from the stories that he told, because there might be a connection, a couple in it and stuff, but it wasn't like, at the time I didn't really know much about genres. I just knew that I liked his Women's Murder Club series. Um, and then I found Nora Roberts, and I just was like, oh my gosh, this is what all books should be. I love Melissa Foster. Who else? I'm not going to remember any authors' names right now, but yeah, I definitely gravitate toward romance, but I also write cozy mystery. I love cozy mysteries, and I don't mind, like, I like, not James Patterson, who's my husband, John Grisham. I really like the Camino Island series. So sometimes I'll gravitate towards something different, but I really love the romance. It's just my favorite.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I read Narnia. I really gravitated towards fantasy. Um, I really loved Lord of the Rings and Shakespeare. I actually did
Yeah,
a lot of Shakespeare when I
nice.
was younger because I have that theatrical background.
Yeah.
I used to go into the library and spend hours reading um stage plays.
Oh,
That
I
was like
love that.
I used to love reading stage plays. We have this. I live in California now. Grew up here, but I did live in Canada for a while. So in Huntington Beach,
I love
there's
that.
this huge library. It's just there's waterfalls inside. There's three
Oh,
stories.
wow.
Gorgeous, right? So I would just spend hours and hours in there, and I would just go to the stage play section actually, and I would read, Sam Shepard and Shakespeare and all those things. But I've always, like you, always looked for the romance, even when there was just not, there was just a
Yeah.
hint of it. Always looked for it, and
Yeah.
so that's probably, when I decided I wanted to write books, I knew it would be romance, but um, it was actually Penny Reed that got me into
Oh,
writing romantic comedy because I was reading her books. I just was laughing
oh, I
so,
love that.
and that's what I wanted. I wanted
Yep.
people to laugh because
Yep.
that's the greatest thing, right? So that's what got me into romantic comedy as opposed to, like romantic suspense. There's so many different
Yeah.
subgenres, right?
Yeah. I
So
love that.
before we run out of time, can you each of you tell us a little bit about what's coming next from you as an author? We'll start with you, Sophie, because in some ways your upcoming book kind of mirrors Gigi's books in a way.
It does, yeah. Um, Next, I have in September, I have my first hockey romance coming out. I'm very nervous.
Yay!
As a Canadian who should know more about hockey, I don't. So yeah, it's You Make It Feel Like Christmas comes out in September. I'm very, very excited about this book. I've pushed myself in different ways for this one. I'm just really thrilled with the characters, and it's the second book in the Can't Help Falling in Love series. So I'm really excited about that. And right now I am currently working on edits for Grayson's story, and that'll tie up the trilogy for the Get Lost series. So
Wow, I'm excited that okay. I'm
yeah,
excited for that. So you need to
I'm
share
scared.
some stuff with me.
Yeah.
You need to have a chat.
Yes. Yes.
That's great.
What
Well, yeah,
about
so my
you?
next book is the fourth and final book in the Toronto Titans hockey
Oh,
series. And this is fun because in it is a romance. Uh, these are romantic comedies. They're funny, they're light, the Toronto Titans. But there's always a little adventure subplot.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
so in book one, there were kind of amateur sleuths, and there was a someone stole a trophy. In book two, my main character finds out his dad you know, was in the mafia. He didn't realize. There's a little, but it's
Wow.
silly, right? It's not.
Yeah.
And so
No, it's awesome.
this upcoming book, takes place in Switzerland in this tiny little town,
Oh,
um, where there is actually takes place. Bleh. Um, there was an actual thing that happened, and there was a lockout in the NHL
oh,
where they couldn't contract agreements, right? And so
yeah.
this
I
thing happened
remember.
in this where they couldn't agree, and so some of the players go to Europe, right? So he goes to Switzerland, and there's kind of like a little bit of James Bond element to it. So I'm very excited
Nice.
about that.
That's how old I am. I remember the hockey lockout. That's awesome. I love that. I love that you have those subplots.
Yeah, I
Yep.
like to have a little bit of interest subplots because the readers a lot of times don't like third act breakups. And so if you have a
Yeah.
little subplot where a little adventure is happening, you
Yeah.
don't need that.
Yeah.
You do need some kind of something to happen, right?
Yeah.
To make things crazy. So
Yeah.
the adventure subplot comes in and, you know, something wild is happening. So
Yeah.
that's what the excitement you get.
Yeah. That's a great distraction.
How can readers learn more about you and your books? Are you, you've mentioned social media. Do you have websites,
Yeah.
newsletters? Tell us all of the details.
I have all of that. I'm always on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I have newsletters through my website. I send them out once a month. And um, are there any other ways? Yeah, I'm always on Instagram. I'm always around
And what is your
obsessively.
website?
My website is sophiesullivanauthor.com. And all my stuff is also, if you go on my Instagram, it's right in my bio. It's got the links to everything.
What about you, Gigi?
Same thing. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. And I have a website, gigiblume.com. And if you do go into my Instagram, you'll see my links in my bio. I send a newsletter once a week, and I have a free book. If you want the free book to sign up for my newsletter, um, you can get updates from me weekly, and it's usually some weird ramblings. But
Nothing wrong with that.
We
Yeah.
called it colorful in the trade.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
Well, I can't believe how quickly our time has flown by.
Yeah.
I'm very
That did go
fortunate
very quick.
to have with us two extremely talented and entertaining authors, Sophie Sullivan and Gigi Blume, who both have books you'll want to read if you're a romance reader or you have a romance reader in your life. I'd like to thank Sophie and Gigi for joining us today. And for those tuning in virtually, thank you.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Thank
Yeah.
a
you.
lot
It
of
was really
fun.
great. Yeah.
That's great. And in case I lose you because I'm not used to the tech part, you were both wonderful.
Thank
We'll
you.
get the link to you usually within a week or so.
Perfect. Thank you again for hosting us. It was great. And Gigi, thank you for agreeing to hang out with me.
Thank you. This has
Thank
been so
you.
much fun.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.